Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
You're listening to Bloomberg UK Politics, your bite-sized guide to the corridors of power. I'm Stephen Carroll.
And I'm Yuan. Well, we are finally almost there. Churches and schools and libraries around the country are standing by to be transformed tomorrow morning for the first general election in, well, a surprisingly long time. Now, I've seen it reported today that it's the last day of campaigning, but that's not quite true. Parties can and will campaign tomorrow, but the rules just don't allow us to report on it. So today is our final chance to take a look back over the last 6 weeks. We've got two top Bloomberg politicos in the studio, but first, let's have a little refresher.
These uncertain times call for a clear plan and bold action to chart a course to a secure future. You must choose in this election who has that plan.
On the 4th of July, you have the choice. And together, we can stop the chaos, we can turn the page, we can start to rebuild Britain and change our country.
The choice is going to be between us or between them. Okay. Be afraid if it is them, is all I would say. And we will talk about leadership things after an election.
They are split down the middle on policy, and frankly, right now, they don't stand for a damn thing. So our aim in this election is to get many, many millions of votes.
3, 2, 1, bungee.
Keir Starmer is not being straight with you about his plans to raise your taxes. I don't think that's leadership.
I'd like you to explain how they're coming down.
Because they were coming down from where they were when they were higher.
7.2.
And they're now on their way down. They are down, right? Yes, because the NHS was impacted by industrial action.
A 98-year-old D-Day veteran told us that you let the country down. Is he right?
I participated in events both in Portsmouth and in France over 2 days because this is an incredibly important moment for our country to commemorate the sacrifice of all of those and their service. And it was a real honour and a privilege to meet many veterans.
We have 48 hours to deny Labour that supermajority that Keir Starmer craves, to save Britain from the danger of a Labour government.
They are not saying, look, if you vote Tory or vote Conservative on Thursday, these things will happen. They're just in this negative, desperate loop. I just think it's increasing desperation, bordering on hysterical now.
Well, Keir Starmer not talking about us after this election campaign, but some of the highlights there that we heard over the past weeks of campaigning. Joining us to discuss is our UK political editor, Alex Wickham, and our associate editor, Ailbhe Ray. Thank you very much to both of you for joining us. I'm sure you're tired after the past few weeks. We heard there some of the moments of the campaign. Alex, was this a campaign that had a lot of highlights?
I think, things changed during the campaign. Often things don't change during campaigns, and you're just waiting for polling day, and maybe it feels like that. But I actually do think there have been some changes over the last 6 weeks. The Conservatives obviously started in a very bad position, but there is some evidence through polling that the basically poor performance of Rishi Sunak during the campaign. We heard the D-Day example there, and there have been other moments in the campaign as well where the Prime Minister has struggled. It may not have moved the Labour poll lead that much, but what it has done is perhaps convinced some typical Tory voters who might have been willing to come back to the Tories on election day. It probably has convinced some of them to stay home or vote for the Reform Party just because they're pretty unimpressed with the Conservatives. And obviously, we'll see whether that happens on the day. But that's certainly the fear in the Conservative Party, is that, the fact that they've basically not had a very good campaign means that they will struggle to close the gap. Whereas in the Labour Party, they're this big question of, are they going to have a wobble, a big moment in the campaign where they come under this huge scrutiny, where everyone starts to question whether what Keir Starmer's plan is, as Rishi Sunak has tried to make happen, hasn't really happened. They've been relatively calm and collected and comfortable in their position. So I think that's arguably will vindicate the strategy of the Labour Party.
Ailbhe, what are some of the memorable moments from your campaign?
Oh, so I think Alex has done a good job of highlighting the things that have moved. And of course, Nigel Farage reappearing on the scene has kind of moved the dial. But I think actually I'm probably going to look back on this campaign and sort of see it as one that kind of began to feel a bit rigid by the middle of it, really from the point that postal votes dropped about 3 weeks ago after the manifestos. It has felt like Labour relaxed a little bit. And, they're still giving that public message of no complacency and, you can, change only happens if you vote for it, etc. But I think when they got to that point, the polls hadn't narrowed, and they knew that they were locking in several million votes with those postal voters who, as we know, tend to return their ballots the second they get them. I think once we got to that point, it felt like it was slightly locked in, and in a way, like my enduring memory of this campaign will be being on that battle bus with Keir Starmer and just going from stop to stop, marginal seat to marginal seat, him getting out, the local members having their placards, him giving the same speech, giving the same lines to local TV, and then getting back on the bus or into his Land Rover with his security team and rinse repeat, giving the same message again. It has kind of, I mean, that's the sort of the natural way of political campaigns, I guess, but it has kind of felt a little bit repetitive as the campaign has worn on, to be honest.
Ailbhe, when you meet Labour senior figures in the Labour Party, do you get the feeling that they are genuinely concerned about people showing up to vote and about votes drifting off to other parties, or can they kind of barely hide their glee when the cameras are off?
I think that they are a little bit worried around the edges about it not being locked in. I think that's part of the psychology of the Labour Party. Like, this is a party that is used to losing. Even in 2015, it's easy to forget that on polling day, both camps, Tory and Labour, thought that Labour would win. And it was only when the exit poll dropped that they realised Ed Miliband was not on course to be Prime Minister. So I think that they are a little bit scarred by experiences like that, and they do want people to come out and vote. But that's maybe a bit more at this stage about the scale of the victory rather than whether they will actually lose. Because really privately, it wouldn't be exactly glee, but I suppose it's more people talking about feeling daunted by everything they're going to have to do in government starting on Friday and how their lives are going to change. So I guess there is a kind of implicit assumption there that they know they're going to win, even though they're trying not to be complacent about it.
Alex, we spent the past 6 weeks trying to comb over the details of what the parties have announced, but has this actually been a policy-rich campaign? Have we got a clearer idea of what the parties stand for now versus 6 weeks ago?
I think on the Conservative side, the policies are, tax cuts for everybody, which are perhaps easier to say when you probably know you're not going to win and you're never going to have to implement them and deal with the fiscal consequences. For the Labour Party, it is a cautious manifesto. There isn't a vast amount of new policy in there, but the things that they have announced, a pretty radical planning reform programme and house building sort of blitz that they claim will deliver a sort of economic growth miracle. It's a big policy if they can build 1.5 million homes in 5 years, which is a flagship policy of theirs. That will, if they could achieve that, make a big change to the country. And on the green energy transition as well, they're going to set up this entity, GB Energy, in soon after taking office. It essentially looks like it's going to be a kind of investment vehicle to bring in huge tens of billions of pounds of private investment into clean power and renewables. Again, if they can do that over the next 5-10 years, that's a big change for the country. A lot of it is fixing problems, though. Can they get NHS waiting lists down? Can they sort out prisons? Can they sort out a crisis in childcare? They're not promising the world on a lot of key areas. They're basically saying we're going to get ourselves back above water. So it's not exactly the most inspiring position.
Now, Ailbhe, I want to ask you about tomorrow night. Now, leaving aside the exit poll, and if I may have a small rant, I hate the exit poll. It's a bit like you've got a ticket.
It ruins it.
You totally ruined it. You've got a ticket to the cup final. You're waiting for the match to kick off,
and
the
need
score
to move
flashes
to
up.
Ireland.
It's going to be 3-1 to France. I really hate the exit poll. But anyway, leaving aside that,
Spoiler, yeah.
It's a total spoiler. What seats are you going to be looking out for tomorrow night, Ailbhe?
Ooh, so Alex and I are on the early shift, and our excellent colleagues Ellen and Joe have the task of watching the flood of seats overnight. And I think Alex and I will be dialing on probably more around 5 a.m. when a lot of the results will already be in. But there are so many interesting ones. I mean, basically all the cabinet figures. I guess Rishi Sunak. It's really mad, to be honest, that we're even talking in terms of him possibly losing his seat. He probably won't, but that's the obvious one to look for. Whether he loses his seat, whether Jeremy Hunt right before that, whether he holds on, that's looking unlikely. All those figures on the Tory side, Penny Mordaunt, Suella Braverman, the possible leadership contenders, the people who could shape the future of the party after polling day. That will be really interesting to watch. But also, I am quite interested just to see exactly how Labour does. We did a feature last week on how around the edges, even though Labour is on course for a massive majority, there are places where they could still struggle. And even there are a couple of people in what would be Keir Starmer's cabinet who won't necessarily win. So Thangam Debonair in Bristol Central, who should be the next culture secretary, she could lose to the Greens. And Shabana Mahmood, who would be the Justice Secretary, is facing a tough time against an independent in her seat of Birmingham Ladywood, against this independent who's kind of made Gaza a big election issue. So those two, and also other places where Labour MPs or candidates are saying that they think reform could come second against them. So seeing basically on the one side how much the Greens take off Labour, and on the other side how close reform run into them.
Alex, briefly, what's going to be the text message that gets your heart racing?
I think the Tory civil war that breaks out in the minutes after the exit poll drops as the blame game erupts, and they all try and stick the knife into each other.
Okay, Alex Wickham, our political editor, and Ailbhe Ray, our associate editor, thank you very much for joining us. Good luck tomorrow with it as well. We have a whole host of podcasts over the past couple of weeks tackling the big issues in this election, and a great series from Ailbhe as well, looking at the women shaping Britain, 4 women from the Conservative and Labour parties who are worth watching after this election as well. So plenty of back material for you to listen back to as you think about making your choice in the election tomorrow. That's it from us for today. If you like the programme, don't forget to subscribe. Give it 5 stars so other people can find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen.
This episode was produced by James Walcock, and our audio engineer was Peter Nicolino. I'm Yuan Potts.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. We'll be back with more on Friday. This is Bloomberg.
Bloomberg UK Politics. Listen weekdays at noon on DAB Digital Radio in London.